Russian President Vladimir Putin has declared a 3-day ceasefire in the war with Ukraine next month to mark the 80th anniversary of the victory and the end of the Second World War in Europe. However, with constant attacks and Russia repeatedly contradicting its own words, the likelihood of that is very much debated. Is this announcement another one of Russia's games? Is Moscow going to successfully impose the recognition of Crimea and other oblasts as Russian territory in the ceasefire deal? Is the U.S. going to convince Zelensky to cede Crimea? Ivana Stradner, research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, joins me now to discuss these mounting questions around the ceasefire. Ivana, thank you so much for joining. It's great to have you on the program again.
Always great to talk to you and your team.
Pleasure. So Putin declared a ceasefire 72 hours during Victory Day. So what are the chances that this will actually take effect, especially now that Russia has broken its promises so many times before?
If the history is any indicator, I'm not going to be positive about that. And as a matter of fact, Russia already violated ceasefire in the past and then blamed Ukraine. That's number one thing. The second thing that I want to emphasize is if Russia is serious about ceasefire, why then we have to wait almost 10 days? Why Russia doesn't commit today to pursue such effort? And the third thing that I want to emphasize regarding so-called Victory Day that Russia is celebrating as part of its propaganda machine, it is just, part that they are going to use such a day to rally their allies, and then again, to blame Ukraine and to likely, just like previous years, to link that to fighting Nazi. So it's actually in Russia's also interest to pursue such a ceasefire. But as I mentioned, that could be part of Putin's game to actually violate and then to blame Ukraine, because it's exactly what Moscow has been doing for a very long time.
So in your points that you mentioned, you posed a very interesting question. The second question you had about why not now, why later. We've heard from Andriy Sybiha. He said that if Putin wanted ceasefire, he could have it today, and it should last for at least 30 days. So we're not looking at 72 hours, we're looking at 30 days. So why do you think that Russia took this step, and what does it signal?
So to begin with, I'm actually not so sure that Putin wants a long-lasting ceasefire, because the war still benefits him. There is one thing that he needs, which is a break and a pause to reposition his military, to rebuild, and then to continue with his war. Because we have to understand how Moscow thinks about war in Ukraine. And Putin is very blunt about his ambition when it comes to Ukraine, which is to subjugate Ukraine. So make no mistake, Putin is not interested in a long-lasting peace. All he really needs to want actually is to reposition his military and to continue with his attack. And the second point that I also want to make, which is that this war in Ukraine, it is not only about Ukraine. We already see a lot of sabotage activities across Western and Central and the rest of Eastern Europe. So Russia doesn't really need to roll on tanks and jets in any of those countries, and Putin is not going to stop at Ukraine. So we really have to understand that strategic deception is a cornerstone how Putin actually thinks about a war. He's a KGB guy, he's not a military guy, and he's not interested in peace anytime soon, because his ultimate goal is to restore what he likes to call Russian greatness and to continue with his imperialistic ambition.
So do you think that the Victory Day is actually going to be some sort of a pivotal moment after which we're going to see an escalation when it comes to military activity of Russia on the Ukrainian territory?
I do not have any crystal ball to claim what Putin is going to do. But regardless, whether it's going to last 72 hours or whether it's going to last several weeks, it doesn't matter. Because as I mentioned, Putin is in his position right now to negotiate, to try to convince the Trump administration that he wants a peace. In the meantime, he is going to continue arming the Russian military, to reposition it, and to continue with his attacks. So we should absolutely not fall for those tricks, and also to pay attention to whether there will be another attempt of so-called, as Putin calls it, like ceasefire, but then to blame Ukraine and to put a ball in Kiev's court and to launch a full propaganda campaign claiming that it's actually Ukraine that violated such ceasefire. So we should not fall for those tricks.
U.S. President Donald Trump said that he believed that Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky is ready to seize Crimea in order to reach ceasefire. Do you think that Mr. Zelensky would actually make that concession, considering the price that would have to be paid for a ceasefire?
I think there are a lot of words, and we have to distinguish between words and facts/actions. So I haven't heard President Zelensky talking about that, but I saw in American media where allegedly Ukraine might be willing to give up on part of its territory. I think it's important not to panic right now, and to pause for a moment and to wait for further actions, because this could be also part of their negotiation tactic. However, even if some policymakers in Washington and elsewhere in the West think that they can also easily outsmart Putin by giving him what he wants to hear and what he wants to get in the short run. Actually, if you read the Russian newspaper, they have propaganda for the West. They claim, how negotiations are going great, but actually they do not also trust Washington, and they believe that also Washington is playing its own game, especially now when Trump has changed rhetorics towards Russia.
Well, unsurprisingly, Russia sets the scene by spreading Russian propaganda not only in their own media. In his interview with the Brazilian newspaper O Globo, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said apart from Crimea, they would like to see other oblasts that they're currently occupying actually enter the Russian territory as part of the ceasefire, including Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. Do you think that it would be at any point possible for Russia to actually step back on that demand? Is there a sort of a margin, or they're set in stone when it comes to wanting those oblasts?
So there are numerous, people who have been written about the history of negotiation with Russia. And basically the deal is you give Russia one thing, but then they want 4 more. So that's the part of their negotiation tactic, which is absolutely not in good faith. So they're just changing their bargaining strategy, which means asking for more and more, so Ukraine eventually, gives up, and also so the U.S. also gives up. So that's, part of their bargaining strategy. What they really want is one thing. The second thing is what they will be able to achieve in the long run, and I doubt that Ukraine will easily cede its own territory.
Ivana, it's always great to have you on the show to join me to talk about all things Russia and the ceasefire. Thank you so much. Ivana Stradner, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, was my guest.
Always a pleasure.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment with more news, features, and interviews, and we'll see you there.